tour. We knew that coming from Indianapolis, Chicago, a short trip, but a trip from something warmer into the hall. So, and especially here is the place to be. So, I'll give you the gist of it. Classic hip hop is a different category than something that's been called old school for the longest period of time. We're facing a hip hop genre over the last 35 years of its existence, and always got, well, really, especially the last 25 years, that's been defined by somewhere and somebody else. Usually an aspect that people call corporations that existed outside of our community and did not live in our community, or that really adhered to caring about the issues that took place that formed the music in the first place. Much of it comparative to what y'all know and your family as people that put most of their time and heart and soul into Chicago blues or electric blues. But here we are, hip-hop is also being a reflective, symbolic understanding and explanation and reflection of a people. But it seems like the definition had gotten away from us of what hip-hop is, or what hip-hop was. It's a culture coming out of, it's a subculture coming out of the culture of people. It happens to be the way we walk, talk, the way we move, the way we think, where we come from is always on top of our mind, and that has been reflected in the music. Rap is one element out of that form that happened to be the voice of what it always happened to speak and talk about. Yada, 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 fast forward. When it came down to looking at the 35 years of rap music and hip-hop as a recorded form since 1979, or entering its 40th year as an art form coming out of New York, an area that was disenfranchised, that out of the ashes like a phoenix rose people who happened to be involved in creativity and expressing themselves when everything else was shut down, from the education to community outreach or even community self-empowerment. All that was shut down in the mid-70s, and hip-hop rose like a phoenix in that area and actually spoke to us ever since we were little kids or whatever, and also the many people involved today ever since they were part of the youth. But over the last 15 years, and maybe 17 years, there has been a detachment. So when it comes down to defining hip-hop today, we've seen a lot of people that have been involved in hip-hop from a lot of different aspects, the recording aspects, the live performing and touring aspects. All of it is atrophied. People might say hip-hop is bigger than ever, but then that's the mainstream opinion of it when it happens to make the news, just as it does when we have an accident, or crime is in our community, or like what the New York Post did the other day, showed somebody looking at a train ready to die, and they just wanted to get eyeballs, or people to buy that bullshit piece of paper, or whatever. Hip-hop's definition has gotten away from itself, but this has been a long time. It's always been happening. It's been happening for a long time. So, long story short, in hip-hop music, the definition of what people considered old school was something that once it entered the cycle of 25 years, 30 years for some artists, when people said Public Enemy was nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the area of music, we decided to say, you know, with this light of attention, we wanted to point to the genre in which we came from and actually see if we could provide some infrastructure, a responsible infrastructure to what it is. And what it is defined by the artists that have represented and have actually put their energies and effort into being able to spit what they believe. And that's the difference from maybe artists from 25 and 20 years ago or 15 years, which we consider eligible for being called a hip-hop guy, 15 years of actually recording, being out there in the world, doing their music. You know, artists actually spit what they believe. Whether they came from a dark aspect, whether they came from a lighter aspect, it was always balance in the music. So what we had seen over the last 5 years was this whole thing of, okay, old school shows, old school tours. Promoters would go around and they get a bald stage and they'll call up some numbers of people that used to fill Fresh Fest in arenas 20 years ago and throw a show together. And we saw that the way that they treated hip-hop music was the same kind of way that a lot of people kind of treated the blues about 15 to 20 years ago. Just like throw them out there and see what they can pull. So there was no kind of care or infrastructure put to it. So I worked on a situation in technology of building Hip Hop Gods. And Hip Hop Gods was basically calling old school classic. These are classic artists. And so we had spent the last 2 years really accentuating on the fact that these artists perform now all over the world. Still, they ain't never stopped. They record up to date. Yes, people might know them for the music that they've done 15, 20 years ago under record companies that robbed them just like blues companies that rob blues artists. It's like the same cycle over and over again, but one thing that's been similar. Usually these have been black artists and black people coming from the black community being defined eventually by somewhere else. I said there's something that had to change. The definition had to be able to at least be inherent upon these artists, and this is where the Hip Hop Gods concept came from. Hip Hop Gods because why not? We're calling black people gods. We want to look to the root and the architect of this and what it's about. It comes from deep within. It's godly. It's deeds of good. And I think that's the hip hop idiom as far as my understanding. To make a long story short, not to get long-winded at it, Hip Hop Gods manifested into saying its reality could be a tour. And I made personal calls to people that say, you know what, you look around, and not only had it been a classic tour of artists, there had been any tour that goes from east to west. Because hip-hop was almost like a refrigerator where people kept going to, and nobody ever went shopping to replenish it. Its ecosystem was robbed and raped. It's just the same old story that happened to all our genres of music that we participated in, happened in hip-hop all over again. So I stepped to the side, and my group, which has never ever stopped, although they say, you know, I read these things like, okay, the former front man of Public Enemy, or the former, or, you know, he's like, where the hell did they get this news? So not only do we have to control our definition, we got to control the news of ourselves. So I made calls to people who are my peers, people I've seen, you know, do their thing, have fruitful careers, and I said, well, what can I do to bring this together in some kind of unison or solidarity and make a statement that classic hip-hop is as big as classic rock, which was formed in the mid-'70s when they wanted to separate the Beatles and the Chuck Berrys on radio from the Bostons and the Peter Framptons in the mid-'70s. And they created classic rock, which became more authentic and bigger than mainstream rock. So we're not saying we want to be bigger, but what we want to say is that eventually somebody might come into hip-hop under the definition of other companies or corporations or whatever, but they gotta come to a point where their art is manifested to something that befits a skillful area, befits something that somebody comes to and says, yes, this is what it is. You're not gonna get that overnight. You can become big overnight and explode and sell, I don't know, I'm not even gonna put a number figure onto it. You become big overnight and just become a sensation, a mainstream sensation, by way of a corporation or all these radio stations that program in our community, but we have no say-so on what it should be, called urban stations, where you can actually call it something, but take the black ownership out of it. but speak with black faces to everybody and say this is black music or urban music or hip-hop. So we were against that. So the Hip Hop Gods was formed out of that. And I made personal calls to artists who are still doing their thing. I said, let's do this together. And that's how the Hip Hop Gods tour was formed. We started out in DC. It was an unbelievable response to this. New York the next night. We went to Philly as a part of an old school package, and everybody came about on stage and represented our tour, but still with the same demographic, but in a large arena, and everybody was just blown away, wishing our tour would have came through Philadelphia. Then we went up in the areas like Boston and Vermont, made our way to Indianapolis yesterday, and here we are in Chicago to make a statement that, you know, just like they say about the NBA or whatever, that classic hip-hop is fantastic, it's thorough, and just like a throwback to the old Motown reviews or the Dick Clark Caravan of Stars, this is not 8 artists coming at you just thrown together we're all different, well, you know, people might have their different points of view, but we all get down, perform together. We all make sure that when people come in minute one, when they leave at the end of the night, they knew this was a tour, a review, just like if they went to see a play and they leave like, yo, this was just a world of hip hop coming at me, and I'm awestruck, because we wanted to put the AWE back into audience. So that has been the show result. The artist is a past, present, and future type of agenda. Where, yeah, everybody, oh wow, I remember that back in the day. That's what they do at old school shows. But one thing we found out, at an old school show, people come in, they go down memory lane, and they left with just that memory for what happened before. The point of what I'm saying is that there's a past, present, and future. The present is that they're here now performing, they're doing their thing. The future is social networks. We're doing different things on stage, involving people in the audience, and also integrating it into the stratosphere of people saying, wow, this is going on now. Wow, how do I involve myself? How do I stay in contact with this music that this person is doing? How do I communicate with them? That had never happened in music before. It never happened in music before where Buddy Guy would actually get down and do something and have somebody in the audience actually tweeting them back as he's actually on guitar. That'd be kind of difficult, but you know. But what I'm saying is that there's a past, present, and future involved, that this is the litmus test, the example of artistry into the 21st century, representing hip-hop, and what best than a classic hip-hop artist that already knows how to do it so well, to attract, to actually come out and engage and represent the art form to the fullest instead of being defined from somewhere else. Okay?
And so, D, in your honor, I'm a fan. I believe that in your honor, not only in your honor as music, anybody support music, hold hands. Hold hands. Hold hands. Support music. That's right, you know about it. Hold hands. And a hug too.
All right, you know I'm gonna hold hands and still talk, all right? And I'm gonna move this on.
There you go. Gonna move it on, but hold hands. We support you all the way.
Yes, ma'am. So really, from that point, and I appreciate that, sister, Hip Hop Guides Tour, the artists I'll introduce